let me precede it with a brief preamble. How did this idea emerge? We're involved in a project to study the water use culture in the Armenian highlands from days immemorial to our times. The project involves archaeologists, paleontologists, ethnographs, folklore scholars. We're trying to capture an interdisciplinary snapshot. So I tried to make my presentation resonate with the subject of this, and therefore thought about presenting the Yerevan water landscape. This is a little detached from my specialization, that which I will present mostly, although I've been thinking about these a while ago, and I've even discussed that with my ethnograph friends, but there was never a need to formulate it as a serious research. This paper is based mostly on my observations, which I've made from my school years onwards. Let me conclude the preamble by saying that I was born in a district which is on a bank of a canal in the Zangu Gorge. This canal was named Zangu Canal. It's named after the river, and the Yerevan fortress is in the same block, the heart of old Yerevan, that is. I hope that Hamlet Melkumian will present Getar River at greater length, subsequently in a compilation that will be included. When I was penning this, I understood that this is a vast subject. It's impossible to map all of these water codes on Yerevan, which is why I focused on Hrazdan, especially when I saw that there was a standalone presentation on Getar, which allowed me to shed this burden. A river is very characteristic for European towns. Europeans always perceive the city with the river, as opposed to Oriental cities such as Yerevan. Yerevan has never enjoyed a navigable river, so it was not a transportation channel like in major European cities, where it also has a tourist significance for tourist traffic. So classically, Yerevan is not considered to be a river-based city. The biggest river, Hrazdan, is not navigable, and because of the water intake from the last decades, it's been diminished to a rivulet, so it's only conventionally a river. I will skip reference to environmental considerations. No town in Armenia has a river per se, as opposed to, let's say, capital of Georgia, Tbilisi, because even those cities in Yerevan, which more or less have a significant river flowing through them, this is Vanadzor, Kapanijevan, Dilijan, Alaverdi. These rivers are not used for transportation. This is determined by the alpine landscape of Armenia, and there is no river like Kura, maybe only Araxes, which is now a border river between two countries. Therefore, both urban and rural environments of Armenia never used water for transportation. The only exception is Lake Sevan. The bottom photograph, Sevan had its own fleet. The First Republic had a military fleet. And this tombstone belongs to, the inscription is in the Russian language. It's a tombstone of a captain of the Sevan military fleet. It's in the Sevan monastery's entrance. Returning to Yerevan, as in some other settlements in Armenia, after all, in the city landscape, the river had both symbolic and practical significance. In particular, because of the alpine landscape, the canyon of Razdan adds a particular aesthetic appeal to the metropolis of Yerevan, which was exploited both in the Soviet times and nowadays as a showcase of Yerevan, although less attention is paid to this river in recent decades. If we look at it historically, early 19th century, the fortress of Yerevan was overlooking Razdan, Zangu in Persian, the current wine factory. This is Razdan and Getar, but I'll leave Getar to Hamlet. This is the wine factory which was built in the place of the Yerevan fortress. When the Russians captured the Yerevan fortress, the very next day, Griboyedov's play Gore от Uma was staged here, and there is a plaque, memorial plaque. When Raphael Israelian built this factory, he allocated a plaque to that event in particular. The fortress stretched from the current wine factory to the Kond Hill, representing the eastern border of Yerevan. On the other hand, sides, Yerevan was flanked by Saritag and Nork hills, so the entrance to Yerevan went through the Red Bridge over Razdan, the ruins of which were until recently under the Victory Bridge. When I was little, one arch was still there. It's gone now. Surprisingly, the Committee for the Preservation of Historical Monuments has ignored this altogether. If I'm not mistaken, it dates back to 17th century. And it was called red because of its color. So the river Razdan and its canyon represented the eastern boundary of Yerevan, and it's only later that Yerevan expanded on the next bank of Razdan. Before that, for about a century, beginning with Russian rule and on to the first couple of Soviet decades, Yerevan remained exclusively on the left bank of Razdan, and Razdan remained the border of the city. Only in the 40s of the 20th century, the Noragyog and Kilikia districts were built on the right bank, mostly vernacular architecture. They turned the canyon into an urban environment. The canyon became the official old town or downtown vernacular. So it was not a fully fledged urban settlement. Repatriates and Noragyog was mostly people from Abaran, resettlers, internal migrants. Kilikia was mostly repatriates. So Red Bank districts after the Second World War, during Khrushchev period, were augmented by the state-planned buildings, the Khrushchevkas, which officially was called Red Bank District. So this increased the list of toponyms associated with water officially. Later, Bangladesh, Daftashen, and Kvartal were added. In the 70s, in the southwest west, where the Hrazdan Canyon smoothly segued into a valley. The canyon was no longer there. 0.65 square kilometer spaced artificial reservoir was built called Yerevan Lake. The dam also doubles as a bridge between left and right bank districts. It's beloved by fishermen, anglers, that is. They have canoeing here. And canoeing school is there. There are interesting narratives by the neighboring population, which I have written down at various points in time. Yerevan Lake is also associated with the Soviet mythology, the legendary figure of Shavarsh Karapetyan. Getting back to the urban landscape, right in that time, Hrazdan and the canyon became inseparable part of metropolis of Yerevan, were fully contained within Yerevan, but they were not integrated in the urban environment because of the specific landscape, the depth, and so forth. And the canyon and the river preserved their specific non-urbanist insular specifics. So beginning with the Kievian Bridge all the way to the Yerevan Lake, the Hrazdan Canyon is a type of ecosystem in the heart of larger Yerevan. In the post-Soviet years, the Davitashen Bridge was completed, which quote-unquote completely delineated the upper limit of this ecosystem. But in reality, all the way from Kievian to the Davitashen Bridge, this territory or segment is a transition zone, which in its significance is more like a country environment, and it smoothly links to the country landscape beyond the Davitashen Bridge. The Hrazdan Canyon is the official name of a street which goes along the right bank and all the way down to the bottom of the canyon. It's a road rather than a classical street, and it finishes at the Kievian Bridge. Once it goes under the bridge, it ascends and joins the Tumo Park. The Tumo Park is a standalone topic which has already become part of this ecosystem, but I will not have time to reflect on it. The parks and gardens alongside this canyon are a subject of a good standalone article. So the street called the Hrazdan Canyon starts with the Victory Bridge, the oldest bridge of Soviet Yerevan, and is finished by the Kievian Bridge. This is the intra-urban axis of this segment. Why do I conventionally call it axis? Because around it there are Soviet Hrazdan Stadium, Ziternakabert Memorial, Sports and Concert Complex, the Children's Railway. Each one of them can be expanded on at great length, highlighting their symbolic significance in the Soviet period. One to greater extent post-65, the other post-73, in connection with Ararat 73. Each one of them had a consolidating important consolidating role, bringing people around them. So the human flow originating from these typologically and substance-wise may be compared with classical pilgrimages. I do not know whether such a term exists or not. This may be called modernist pilgrimage. For example, football games, especially when the local team won, transformed into great feasts. I was witnessing this myself when I was little. This dates back to pre-Soviet structure, Saint Sarkis Church, which was completely rebuilt and became a Soviet-era religious building, which simply inherited its location and name from the pre-Soviet period. These actual upper and lower perimeter bridges have significant names. One is called Victory, the other is called Yerevan. The latter was built by German POWs and recalls the Soviet victory over the Nazi Germany and the Armenian contribution to it. And the second is linked to the name of Yerevan Street, linked to the Friendship of Nations, which was sung during the Soviet times. It's not incidental that it links Yerevan Street to the Barekamutsun metro station. Very few remember that the Yerevan Bridge was called the Big Hrazdan Bridge as opposed to the smaller Victory Bridge. And these two bridges not only confined the central axis of the canyon, but also referred to the leapfrogging development of Soviet Yerevan, expansion from one bank of the river to the next one. A leap that allowed Yerevan to gain its worthwhile place in the ranks of million-strong Soviet cities. The four major bridges, Davitashen, Yerevan, Victory, and Yerevan Lake, seem to crisscross the canyon on top without infringing or impairing its ecosystem. The canyon remains complete without being broken down into impermeable segments. After the destruction of Zoragyug, that originated from Saint Sarkis all the way to Argezor, going all the way down to the riverbank, this actual segment of the canyon is completely devoid of residential buildings, which cannot be claimed about the other side of the Victory Bridge downstream. This is where vernacular residential detached housing begins. With certain disruptions, it goes all the way through the Komitas Park. This is Noragyug and Museum of Komitas in Achapnyak. This goes all the way through Yerortmas and Yerevan Lake. As for the right bank, Achapnyak, Noragyug Hill charismatically dominates it. In the past it was called the Paskevich Hill, which was uninhabited until the 80s. The Hrazdan Canyon approaches the countryside, rural countryside environment, but here again there are devotive and semi-devotive structures. For example, Komitas Pantheon in the eponymous park, where renowned figures of art and culture are buried. Let me remind you that the Komitas Park was built in the 30s upon the initiative of Agassi Khanjan, and in 1936 they interred Komitas here a year after his death. So the whole park was called in his name. In the post-Soviet period, there was a planetarium that was converted into Komitas Museum. It's an interesting subject as how this astronomical center turned into a national semi-academic research and memorial institution. Incidentally, in the vicinity of this museum, in the post-Soviet period, they also founded the Zoravar Andranik Museum, dedicated to Andranik Ozanyan's 130th anniversary. It opened in 95, shut down in 97 for a number of reasons, reopened in 2006 under the then Prime Minister Andranik Markaryan, who incidentally was interred next to the same museum in the Pantheon after he died. I'll quickly skip through these sections. Maybe I'll take 1 or 2 more minutes of your time. This ecosystem of the Hrazdan Canyon can break down to 3 subsequent segments. Top to bottom, the first is this transition rural segment that I just referred to. The second is the axis in the center, which no longer has any residential structures. And the third, between Yerevan and Davtashen bridges, is the natural landscape, transitional as well. That's how I conventionally break them down. These are separated by the above-mentioned 4 bridges. In the first segment, there is Gandhi Hayat, Zori Hayat, and Rasnerigund. The Rasnerigund is right next to the Yerevan fortress, where in the Soviet period, not incidentally, they built residential buildings for Russian military servicemen. So the children's fights there were always involving the offspring of the Russian regiment. This could also be added by Noragyo, Boshimaila and others. No time to reflect or dwell on them. There is also contemporary holy sites apart from those 2 pantheons. One could mark Admiral Isakov's bronze memorial complex. Whether incidentally or not, it's built right next to Yerevan Lake, a statue of an admiral. Incidentally, Admiral Isakov's avenue stretches from Victory Bridge to the Yerevan Lake. There is also Vahagan, the Dragon Slayer's bronze statue, which, having roamed through 3 sites, found peace at the Yerevan Lake. So one could think about the 3 hills, Vahagan, the Dragon Slayer, the 3 heroes. Here again is the 30th anniversary memorial of Soviet power establishment in Armenia. And the most recent is the 2012 Armenian Arab Friendship Monument. Which is at the Yerevan Lake Bank. It's right next between the American Embassy and the Russian Orthodox Church. There are interesting narratives, popular narratives. One cab driver once told me that they built the Russian church intentionally on that site because the American Embassy has underground cables and they have wiretaps in the Russian church to eavesdrop on the American Embassy conversations. Each of these memorials has its own symbolism that we could analyze at great length, linking it to the symbolism of the river and the lake. But I will quickly skip through some of these. I would like to speak about this person a lot. He lives in a cave at the Yerevan Lake. I have several interviews with him. He comes from a family of intellectuals. The father was a sculptor. They ended up in debt, sold their house, and this person is now living in this cave. There are quite a lot of folk narratives which touch upon his personal biography and most probably also things heard over the grapevine. He's mostly angling here. For him, the Yerevan Lake epitomizes the whole world. His biggest enemies are the canoes here. Suffice it to say that he is involved in a lot of litigation. He had issues with Sashik because Sashik wanted to get a share, racketeered him to get a share of his angling business here. So there are interesting narratives woven here. He told me how he got notices from the courtroom. I told him, how does the mail deliver this notification? He says the mailman comes and lowered down on a string the envelope. I said, what address? He said, my name, and the address is Yerevan Lake, cave number 1. So basically the cave had a postal address attached to it. Let me conclude. It's common knowledge that in mythical perception the river is the border between human and otherworldly, and the river plays a great significance in the children's microcosm to underline one's own border, to form the identity. We could draw parallels with Axel Bakunskior's story, where the river epitomizes the block-to-block children's fights. The same could be referred to Hrazdan, which is in the child folklore called Khashan, onomatopoeically. Hrazdan is not used by them. Both banks of Khashan were used to launch district warfare between Noragyu residents and the banks across, the old dwellers, using catapults and heavy quote-unquote artillery. The opposite bank was assigned satanic properties because they were deemed to be using dynamite to blow up fish in Hrazdan, which is why there were hours when it was deemed to be hazardous to bathe in it. And I've already mentioned about the Rasneri Gund. I'm not talking about the ponds here, which is another important subject in the toponymics of the segments of the river. Each one was designated after a particular pond. This is the remnants of the Soviet Navy on the Hrazdan River in very bad shape now. This is Khashan, and this is just to finish off. It's interesting that there is a monument in the Hrazdan Canyon in tribute to the person who saved a drowning child. The subject of drowning children is also a very widespread narrative, especially in child folklore, which often is anchored in reality. Mostly when they were picking unripe apricots, there was the narrow segment where lamentably children were falling off into the Zangu Canal and had to be fished out. In conclusion, I would like to thank the organizers for pulling together such an interesting conference.